average Canadian eats at KFC around 20 times a year. That is almost twice a month sitting across from a menu that promises the same crispy, golden, finger-licking experience that Colonel Sanders built his entire reputation on. But here's the thing nobody tells you when you pull into that drive-thru on a Tuesday night. What is happening inside KFC Canada's kitchens, inside the supply chain that feeds those kitchens, and inside the actual ingredients going into that bucket is a story worth hearing before your next order. Remember when you were a kid and KFC smelled like something genuinely special? That smell that hit you from the parking lot and made the whole trip feel like an occasion? A lot of Canadians carry that memory. The question worth asking today is whether what is in that bucket still deserves that memory. Because once you look closely at what KFC Canada is actually serving, what it is made of, how it arrives, and what it does to your body over time, that memory starts to feel like it belongs to a different restaurant entirely. Last week I left a KFC Canada drumstick on my kitchen counter by accident, not in the fridge, just sitting there on a paper towel, forgotten overnight. The next morning I came downstairs and found it looking exactly the way it looked the night before. Same color, same texture, no softening of the skin, no change in smell. I have made roasted chicken at home that starts showing signs of change by the next morning. A real piece of cooked chicken behaves like food. Whatever is coating that KFC drumstick behaves like something else entirely, and that difference is where this conversation starts. KFC Canada markets the same 11 secret herbs and spices that the global brand has guarded since Colonel Sanders first wrote them down and locked them away, like they were the formula for something priceless. And for decades, the mystery around that recipe did exactly what mystery is supposed to do. It made people curious. It made people loyal. It made people feel like they were eating something that could not be replicated anywhere else. But the actual ingredient list used in KFC Canada's kitchens is not nearly as mysterious as the marketing wants you to believe. Former employees and food industry insiders who have worked within the Canadian supply chain have confirmed that the chicken arrives at most locations pre-breaded, pre-seasoned, and frozen in industrial bags, shipped from processing facilities that prioritize consistency and shelf life over anything resembling fresh preparation. The 11 herbs and spices are real in the sense that they exist somewhere in the formulation. What they are coating is a piece of chicken that has already been through more processes than most people would feel comfortable knowing about before it ever reaches the fryer. One former employee at a KFC Canada location in Ontario described the arrival process plainly. He said the chicken comes in bags that are already ready. You open the bag, you cook what is inside, and you serve it. There is no seasoning happening in that kitchen. There is no preparation in any meaningful sense. The kitchen is a heating station. The cooking happened somewhere else, a long time before the food reached that building. The consistency across every KFC Canada location should have been the tell all along. Every piece tastes the same. Every piece has the same texture, the same crunch, the same color when it comes out of the fryer. Real fried chicken made by a person varies. One piece is crispier because the oil was a degree hotter. One piece is juicier because of how that particular cut was positioned in the fryer. KFC Canada's chicken does not vary because variation was engineered out of the process at the facility level long before the bags arrived at your local location. That uniformity is not a sign of quality. It is a sign of manufacturing. Most Canadians assume KFC chicken is chicken, flour, and spices. Maybe some buttermilk. Maybe some salt and pepper in the mix. Something close to what you would use at home if you were making fried chicken for a family dinner on a Sunday afternoon. The actual ingredient list is considerably longer than that and considerably harder to read without a chemistry background. The breading used in KFC Canada's original recipe contains monosodium glutamate, which enhances flavor in a way that your brain registers as deeply satisfying, but that is unrelated to the actual quality of what you are eating. It contains anti-caking agents, texturizers, flavor enhancers, and stabilizers, words that belong in a manufacturing specification document rather than a recipe. One ingredient that appears in the breading formulation, sodium aluminum phosphate, is a compound used in industrial applications, including cement production. At KFC, it contributes to the specific texture of the crunch. It is legally approved for use in food products. That does not make it something that belongs in the mental image you carry of a piece of home-style fried chicken. When you bite into that crust and feel that distinctive crunch, part of what you are experiencing is a carefully engineered texture, not the result of a skilled cook getting the flour and fat ratio exactly right. The chicken itself is often injected with a sodium solution at the processing facility level. This is done to plump the meat, to make it appear juicier, to give it a more substantial weight and feel. It is the food industry's way of adding salt water to a product and presenting the result as freshness. The sodium content in a single piece of KFC Canada original recipe chicken reflects this. A single drumstick carries enough sodium to account for a significant portion of your daily recommended limit. Add a thigh, add a side, add a drink, and you have consumed more sodium in one sitting than your body was designed to process comfortably in an entire day. KFC Canada's menu has some differences from its American counterpart, and Canadians have their own loyalties when it comes to sides. The coleslaw, the gravy, the mashed potatoes. These are the items that make the meal feel complete, that make the bucket feel like a family dinner, rather than just a bag of fried chicken. The mashed potatoes do not start as potatoes. They start as a powder, a dehydrated flake that arrives in large bags at the location and gets reconstituted with boiling water according to a specific protocol. I once watched a worker at a KFC Canada location measure out the powder, pour in the hot water, stir until the texture reached the right consistency, and portion it into serving containers. The result looks like mashed potatoes. It has the color of mashed potatoes. It has a texture that approximates mashed potatoes if you have not eaten real mashed potatoes recently enough to remember the difference, but it is not mashed potatoes. It is a processed powder performing as mashed potatoes, and the sodium content of that performance is higher than most people expect from something that presents as a simple vegetable side. The gravy follows the same pattern. It comes from a powder mix, prepared at the location by adding hot water and stirring. Real gravy is made from pan drippings, from the actual rendered fat and fond left behind by roasting meat. It carries the flavor of what was cooked because it literally comes from what was cooked. KFC Canada's gravy carries the flavor of a powder formulation designed to approximate what real gravy tastes like. There is a difference. Most people who grew up eating real roast dinner gravy can taste it. They just stop noticing it after enough visits because the mind adjusts to what it experiences regularly. The coleslaw is the item that surprises people the most when they look at the numbers. A medium coleslaw from KFC Canada contains more sodium than a bag of regular potato chips. That is coleslaw, a side dish made from cabbage and a dressing that should contain vinegar, a little sugar, and some seasoning. The sodium level in KFC Canada's version suggests that something other than simple seasoning is at work. A nutritionist who reviewed the numbers told me she uses KFC coleslaw as an example in client consultations specifically because it disrupts the assumption that non-fried sides are automatically safer choices. She said people order the coleslaw thinking they made the responsible decision and they consumed more sodium than the chicken beside it. KFC Canada has leaned into poutine as a menu item in a way that makes cultural sense given where they are operating. Poutine is embedded in Canadian food culture. Adding it to the menu was a smart marketing decision. Presenting it as something that belongs alongside a concept like fresh or quality is where the conversation gets more complicated. The gravy used in KFC Canada's poutine is the same powder-based gravy used on everything else. The cheese curds, which are the element that makes poutine rather than just fries with gravy, are sourced and handled in ways that vary significantly by location and by how busy that location is on any given day. Fresh cheese curds squeak against your teeth because of their protein structure. They have a specific springiness that tells you they are fresh. Cheese curds that have been sitting too long, that have been improperly stored, or that arrived at the location past their ideal window, lose that squeak. They become softer and less distinct in the way they feel when you eat them. Multiple customers at KFC Canada locations have noted online that their poutine cheese curds did not squeak. That observation is not just about texture preference. It is a signal about the freshness and quality of the ingredient. One reviewer described the experience as eating fries with gravy and small rubber erasers. Another said it tasted like something that wanted to be poutine when it grew up. The poutine that KFC Canada serves is fast food poutine. That distinction matters more in Canada than it would in any other market because Canadians have access to the real thing and they know what the real thing feels and tastes like. KFC Canada is required to display calorie information on its menu boards, and that information is technically available to anyone who looks for it. The challenge is that the bucket format, the family-style presentation, the communal sharing, makes it structurally difficult to track how much of what you are actually consuming. A single piece of original recipe chicken ranges from around 130 calories for a smaller piece to over 300 calories for a larger breast piece, depending on the cut. That sounds manageable until you account for the reality of how people eat from a bucket. Nobody orders a bucket and eats one piece. The family sharing format is designed to encourage consumption. The pieces keep coming. The sides get passed around. The biscuits disappear. By the time a typical family dinner from a KFC Canada bucket is finished, the average adult at that table has consumed somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 calories in a single sitting, with a sodium load that approaches or exceeds the full daily recommended limit. A friend of mine decided to feed his family KFC Canada exclusively for 5 days, not as a punishment. He was genuinely curious about whether it could work as a temporary convenience solution during a busy week. He tracked everything. By day 3, his kids were asking for something different, and his youngest, who was 6 at the time, said the chicken was making her feel heavy. A 6-year-old used the word heavy to describe how the food made her feel. That is not a vocabulary she had been given. That is a sensation she was reporting. By day 5, he had spent more than his usual grocery budget, felt consistently sluggish by mid-afternoon, and his older child had developed a mild stomach complaint that resolved the day they stopped. He said the experiment answered the question faster than he expected. The fryer oil at KFC Canada locations is the element of the operation that gets the least public attention, and that arguably has the most direct impact on what you are consuming when you eat anything fried there. KFC uses hydrogenated soybean oil, which is the fast food industry's standard for high-volume frying. Hydrogenated oils contain trans fats, compounds that have been banned outright in several countries and are heavily regulated in Canada specifically because of their established connection to cardiovascular risk. The amounts present in any single serving may fall below the threshold that requires disclosure on nutrition labeling. But below the disclosure threshold does not mean zero, and in a diet where KFC Canada appears regularly, those amounts accumulate. The oil change schedule is the other part of this that former employees have been willing to discuss. At busy locations, fryer oil gets changed based on visual assessment and scheduled intervals rather than rigorous quality monitoring. At slower locations, oil can go longer between changes because volume-based browning takes more time to develop. One former KFC Canada worker described the assessment process as looking at the color and deciding whether it could go another service period. She said on busy weekends, nobody had time to change the oil properly during service. It was always a before open or after close task, and if the morning crew was running behind and the evening crew was short-staffed, those tasks got compressed or skipped. Oil that has been used through multiple service periods without being changed has a different chemical composition than fresh oil. It is broken down in ways that affect both the flavor of what is cooked in it and the compounds that transfer into the food itself. The slightly bitter aftertaste that some people notice in KFC chicken on certain days is often the oil talking, not the seasoning. You go in for chicken. The drink is an afterthought. A medium, whatever is cold, something to wash down the meal. What you are actually ordering is a cup containing between 50 and 65 grams of sugar, depending on the specific drink and the pour ratio that day. That is the sugar equivalent of drinking 2 full-size chocolate bars in liquid form alongside your meal. Your body processes liquid sugar faster than solid sugar, which means the spike to your blood sugar happens more quickly and the subsequent crash arrives more reliably. That afternoon heaviness you feel after a KFC Canada meal, the one that makes you want to lie down rather than return to whatever you were supposed to be doing, is partly the fat and sodium doing their work and partly a sugar crash completing its cycle. KFC Canada pushes size upgrades at every opportunity. For $1 more, you can double the volume of that drink. The framing makes it sound like a deal. In terms of what you are doing to your body, you are paying $1 to accelerate a process that was already working against you. It is not upselling. It is nutritional math that the customer is rarely invited to do at the point of purchase. The water option exists but is not promoted. At some locations, asking for water gets you a cup sized for a dentist office rinse rather than a meal. The implied message is clear. Soda is what you are supposed to order here. Water is the option for people who are going to be difficult about it. KFC Canada's brand runs on nostalgia the same way it does everywhere the Colonel's face appears on a bucket. Southern warmth, home-style cooking, a recipe so good it had to be kept secret. The imagery is of tradition, of care, of something made with intention and passed down through generations. None of that is happening in the kitchen of your local KFC Canada. The tradition ended somewhere in the supply chain, in a processing facility that turns chicken into a standardized product designed to taste the same everywhere from Halifax to Vancouver. What arrives at the restaurant is not an ingredient. It is a finished product that gets heated and served. The person behind the counter is not a cook in any meaningful sense of the word. They are an assembler following a protocol. That is not a criticism of them. That is a description of the system they are working inside. The commercials show golden chicken, steam rising, families laughing around a table full of food that looks like it was made with love. The reality is a kitchen where the goal is speed, where the metric that matters most is how fast an order moves from placement to window, and where food quality is defined as consistent rather than excellent. Consistent and excellent are not the same thing. Consistent just means the same every time. It says nothing about what the same is. A friend of mine in Toronto gave up KFC Canada for 30 days. She was not following a program. She was not trying to lose weight specifically. She just wanted to see whether the way she felt on a regular basis was connected to the food she was eating on a regular basis. KFC was her default on busy nights, the thing she ordered when she did not want to think about dinner. The first week was harder than she expected, but not because she craved the chicken. She craved the ease of it, the not deciding. The pulling into a familiar place and getting a familiar result without any effort beyond the ordering. Making dinner felt like an obligation she had forgotten she had, and the effort of it felt disproportionate to what she was used to. That gap between what she had been doing and what cooking actually required shrank considerably by the second week. By the end of week 2, she noticed she was not reaching for coffee at 3 in the afternoon the way she usually did. The afternoon energy drop she had normalized as just how her body worked in the post-lunch hours was noticeably less severe. She had not changed anything else. Same sleep schedule, same activity level. The only variable was the food. At the end of the 30 days, she drove past a KFC Canada on her way home from work, the same one she had stopped at dozens of times before, and she noticed the smell coming from the ventilation differently than she used to. She described it as smelling more chemical than she remembered, more like a frying process than like food. She said she was not sure whether it had changed or she had. She did not stop. She went home and made dinner. She said it felt like a decision rather than a habit, and the difference between those two things turned out to matter more than she expected. This is not about telling you that KFC Canada is the enemy or that every drive-through run is a moral failing. For a lot of Canadians, KFC is tied to specific moments, hockey nights, road trips, the bucket that showed up at the family gathering because someone did not plan ahead, and everyone ended up grateful. Those memories are real and they belong to you. But memories and habits are different things. A memory can stay warm without becoming a weekly routine. You can hold the nostalgia for a specific meal from a specific time without letting that nostalgia drive your choices on every busy Thursday when dinner feels like too much to think about. The next time you see that red bucket and feel the pull of it, take one extra second before you follow the habit. Ask yourself whether you are hungry or whether you are comfortable. Ask whether you are choosing this or whether this is just what happens when you do not make a different choice. Because there is a real difference between those two things. And KFC Canada is very good at making sure you never stop long enough to feel it. You deserve to eat something that knows the difference between feeding you and hooking you. Something made with ingredients you could name. Something that tastes like it came from a kitchen rather than a processing facility 3 provinces away. You might not have 11 secret herbs and spices at home, but you have something KFC Canada does not. You know exactly what is going into the food you make. And in the long run, that knowledge is worth considerably more than a bucket with a smiling colonel on the side and a gravy that started as powder. The colonel had a good story. Your body deserves a better one.